As 1981 was coming to a close, the east coast of the United States was experiencing one of the worst winters in memory. Ronald Reagan's administration was not yet a year old, and it was struggling to control the double-digit inflation it had inherited. For many Americans, the economic outlook, like the weather, seemed bleak. In Baltimore, the president of Maryland National Bank, Bill Dacre, was faced with a serious dilemma.
During the late 1970s, interest rates were rising. By 1981, the prime rate was 21%. The usury law in the state of Maryland said that we could not charge more than 12% for credit card loans. The prime rate at that time was 21%. Under those conditions, there was no way we could make money in the credit card business.
In October of 1981, a team at Maryland National Bank came together to explore the possibility of moving the bank's credit card business to Delaware. The group consisted of Charlie Colley, Bruce Hammonds, John Cochran, and Ken Bowman.
In 1981, the Delaware State Legislature passed the Financial Center Development Act, which deregulated interest rates and annual fees and provided an environment where credit card companies could thrive.
And Bruce, as you remember, in that year, 1981, we lost $3 million for the corporation.
John, Charlie, and myself were working on business plans for moving the credit card to a deregulated environment. We had determined that we could make money if we got the credit card out of the state of Maryland and into that kind of environment. We had two choices. Delaware and South Dakota at that particular time had the same kind of law.
I made several trips to the state of Delaware looking for the right location for the bank. I was with Charlie Colley on several of those trips. We explored downstate Delaware throughout the Milford area, explored several possibilities in the city of Wilmington. We came across one day an abandoned MP store in Newark, Delaware on Route 4. Both Charlie and I walked into this abandoned store, looked at each other and said, "This is the place."
We all thought it was ideal. It was about 50 miles from Baltimore, and we needed to bring about 50 key people with us, and that was within their driving distance. It was also located very close to the University of Delaware, and we knew that we would use the university to hire large numbers of students for the operation. Hiring the key people was one of the major objectives that we had as we came to Delaware. And we really didn't know whether anybody would apply to this new bank. We put an ad in the paper and we waited apprehensively. The first Monday, the phone rang off the hook. We set up an office in a Sheraton hotel room where we moved all the furniture out and put in some office furniture. We did interviewing there. We found fabulous people. We had 5 people apply for every position that was open, and we could have hired 3 out of every 5 people that applied.
The moving date was set for mid-March. In charge of the move was Tom Groft.
In 1982, the bank stored most of its records on microfilm. The microfilm was kept in heavy metal cabinets.
When we moved out of the building on Friday night, there was one file cabinet that we were particularly concerned about. It contained all the microfiche that serviced our customer base from a customer satisfaction standpoint. Ken and I got the movers and we said, hey, make sure you take good care of this file cabinet.
Realizing the importance of these cabinets, I was outside assisting or supervising the loading. We were moving the cabinets out on dollies. One particular cabinet was moved out. The movers moved away from it momentarily and it started to roll down Calvert Street. Ken Bowman, several of the movers, and myself proceeded after this cabinet. Well, it had a head start on us and it was rolling freely down Calvert Street. Hit a curbing, bounced over, and emptied out thousands of sheets of microfilm. We're laying all over Calvert Street.
I walked out on the front street and saw our entire customer service files scattered all over Calvert Street, representing our 300,000 customers.
I had looked around and there was John Cochran, and I can remember it vividly. He was standing there saying, oh my God, just repeating over and over again, oh my God, over these records that were spilled out.
We helped load the trucks, finished about 11 o'clock that night. And then we all met up in Delaware the next morning at the old A&P. We unloaded the Herman Miller workstations, which they were called back then. And it was kind of neat seeing everybody doing something different. And looking back, John Cochran was pretty good at working with tools, and Greg Beccari was pretty good. Of course, Bruce Hammonds had a very difficult time. I don't think he had ever worked with a ratchet before or a screwdriver. I'm not even sure he's ever seen one before. He's very good at what he does as an executive in managing a large company, and that's a good thing, because if he had to depend on putting Herman Miller workstations together, he would starve.
We arrived very early on Saturday morning with 2 trucks. One truck was filled with furniture that we had taken from the Maryland National location. The other truck was empty. Charlie Cawley's role that day was to direct where the furniture was going in the building, and any furniture that he didn't like, that didn't match the atmosphere that we wanted to set up, was directed onto the empty truck and was rejected and sent back down to Maryland National. It was really from day one that we set the tone for a good work environment.
MBNA officially opened its doors in Delaware on March 17th. On the economic front, there was good news. The Consumer Price Index had dropped for the first time in 6 years. It also happened to be St. Patrick's Day.
On the first day that we started in March of 1982, I arrived at work at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and the first thing that I noticed was that there was no coat hangers to hang your coat, obviously being in March, and so my instinct said I better rush home, pick up some coat hangers, and I did so. Picked up about 30 or 40 coat hangers, came back so that everybody else could hang up their coats when they arrived at 8 o'clock. For the first year that we worked in Delaware, we had no computers to work off of, so everything was done on manual files. We actually had cards for each account, and on the account we actually had to staple the application and the credit bureau to it.
We worked in a small room, and a few desks to my right where I was sitting was Greg Vicari's cubicle, and there was another one next to him that belonged to Kevin. And this day this woman came in and she was carrying something, and she went to his office and they were discussing. And then we were wondering what was going on, what did she have? And then he called a general meeting of us, and there was a small group, and he explained to us that this was a computer. And from now on, we were going to use a computer instead of just making the direct telephone calls and putting the information on the cards. And to us, that was like going from a Model T Ford to a new Corvette or something.
Our original goal for new accounts in 1982 was 30,000 accounts. That first year we acquired approximately 35,000 accounts, and we were quite proud of that fact.
We saw the success of those accounts, and we decided to expand our marketing efforts across the United States. At that time, we were really just issuing cards regionally in Maryland, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. But we needed a better credit customer than a credit card company would normally get. So John and Charlie came up with this affinity marketing strategy, which worked extremely well, and we started to roll that out.
I was fortunate enough to get moved to marketing in 1983, and one of the first affinity mailings that we did was the American Dental Association. We really didn't know what to expect, but in the first mailing, it got a 19% response rate, and we were just wowed by the whole reaction to that mailing that we did.
It wasn't unusual for us to come in 7 o'clock every day, and we'd decision applications till about 9 o'clock in the morning. Then we'd go off and do our regular job and come back at 6 o'clock at night and decision until late at night. There were many nights where Charlie, Bruce, and John were there with us decisioning applications, and it was really everyone's job to decision applications. It just wasn't the job of credit.
All the officers in the company had specific jobs to do, and we had more applications, even though we were only doing 30,000 a year, than we could handle in our credit department at that particular time. So at night, we'd come together, all the officers, we'd get in a conference room. There were probably only 20 or 25 of us at that time, and we'd work for several hours each night decisioning applications.
It got to the point that our responses were very strong from our affinity mailings that we were putting out at that time. And it got to the point where they were inviting in people like Terry Flynn and myself to make credit decisions. Quickly, Bruce and Greg Vicari decided that it wasn't necessary to invite, particularly Terry, to any more of our application parties.
Terry would approve everyone that applied for a credit card. So we would, I understand they would find something else for Terry to be involved in so that he wouldn't show up at the lending. Or they'd tell him the lending session was going to be in the cafeteria, and then we'd hold it someplace else. So
Terry was known as Liberal Terry, the borrower's friend.
I remember the day like it was yesterday. Charlie called all the officers into a room and actually started reading letters from customers one by one. And they were about complaints that customers were having with service. Something clicked that day, and that was the day that we decided to get serious about customer satisfaction. And we actually started measuring the service levels that we provided to customers. And really, the evolution of those early programs is the customer satisfaction test program that you see behind me, where we measure customer service levels on a daily basis.
I remember there was a period of time we were growing so fast that there just seemed to be a whole succession of problems that we were having in serving our customers. The Senior Operating Committee met every morning with Charlie at 7 a.m., and we kept meeting until we got these problems under control.
I remember that most of all, the esprit de corps and the teamwork. And I was thinking about that today because it was everyone doing what they had to do to make sure the job got done. We did it in the spirit of it was the right thing to do. We didn't do it thinking that we would become the largest gold card issuer. At the time, if someone needed help because we had a task to get done, we would do it in that spirit.
I came to MBNA in the spring of 1985, and that summer I noticed a great thing that was going on here at the bank. On a nice afternoon in the summer, we'd suddenly declared a picnic, and we'd go out into the courtyard, and the managers would serve hamburgers and hot dogs to all the people. And it was a wonderful thing. We were small enough that you could feed everybody in about 2 hours. By the following summer, I noticed, though, that something had changed about the company, and it was we had grown so much that during one of these picnics in 1986, at one point Charlie Cawley was standing up on a chair and he was thanking everybody for their great efforts that month. We'd put on a lot of new accounts, I guess. And ahead of me in the crowd, one woman turned to another and said, "Who's that man up on the chair speaking?" And I realized that we had grown and it was no longer the same small company, even in those days, that I had joined just a year before. Since MBNA's start in Delaware, the company had experienced unparalleled growth. In 1990, the company could boast nearly 1,900 affinity groups and was the country's fourth largest credit card company, with outstandings exceeding $7 billion. But back in Maryland, MBNA's parent company, MNC Financial, was experiencing something very different. Like many other large banks in the early 90s, Maryland National was plagued by poor loans in real estate. In order to raise capital, one option was to sell MBNA. MNC's largest shareholder was a Cleveland investor named Alfred Lerner. In September 1990, Lerner was determined to find a way to save the bank from possible bankruptcy. At the time, we felt that although the dire situation didn't emanate from MBNA, if we didn't address it, it could possibly have a negative impact on the company, on people's morale, and therefore could affect service. So Charlie Cawley began an extraordinary series of memos in October of 1990, and they continued right through January of the following year. In his first memo, Charlie wrote, "There is no doubt that the problems are many and serious, but there is also no doubt that the problems are being addressed aggressively." And he finished by pledging to keep people well informed about the rescue that was underway. Al Lerner was well acquainted with MBNA. Lerner knew that MBNA's greatest asset was its people and their tremendous productivity, creativity, drive, and spirit. So it was Lerner's plan to preserve the company intact. Initially, the idea of a private sale of MBNA was being entertained. So beginning in November, various companies and interested buyers made the trip to Newark to look over MBNA. Seeing potential buyers come through the bank was probably the toughest part for most of us. It was as if you were being forced to sell a home that you really loved. And nobody felt that more acutely than Charlie did. And in his memo of November 20th, he said, "I don't know what the visitors were thinking as they toured MBNA yesterday, but I do know what I was thinking. I was proud to be one of the people of MBNA. When looking at MBNA through a visitor's eyes, as I did yesterday, it is clear what makes MBNA great. It's people, each one. That's the magic of MBNA." On January 16th, Al Lerner, Charlie Cawley, Bruce Hammonds, John Cochran, and Scott Kaufman set out from Philadelphia in a bid to take MBNA public. Coordinating the trip was Steve Chambers.
Our itinerary called the Road Show had us traveling to 9 or 10 cities in 5 short days. I can remember when we left the airport in Philadelphia, all of us were watching a TV which was on the plane, and as we were taking off, you could see Bernie Shaw talking about the start of the Gulf War. And as the picture started to fade as we got higher in the air, all of us sat there wondering what that might mean to MBNA, and I guess more importantly to the country.
5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
Despite the fact that the nation had just entered a war, The roadshow went ahead. For Lerner and Cawley, the livelihood of some 4,000 MBNA people and their families was hanging in the balance. Neither man was going to turn back.
Trying to sell a standalone credit card company to the public for the first time in Wall Street history, in the middle of a recession, in the middle of the Persian Gulf War, into a market that wasn't interested in buying initial public offerings of stock, was truly a challenge. The way the stock is sold is through what's called a roadshow. It's a series of presentations and one-on-one meetings with investors all across the country. I remember our first one-on-one meeting. It was with T. Rowe Price in Baltimore. We walked into an auditorium. There were about 15 people there waiting for us. I remember thinking to myself, so this is a one-on-one. Bruce and Charlie would talk about the operations of the company. I would talk about its financial performance, and then we would answer questions. Al Lerner talked enthusiastically about the way he felt about the company and would say at the end that he planned to invest $100 million of his own money in the stock of the company. And at that point in the room, you could hear a pin drop.
On January 29, 1991, with some relief, Charlie was able to send the last memo in this series to the people of MBNA, and I'll read from it. It occurs to me as I sit here in this meeting room in New York that the really important contributors to this day are not here. They're not the lawyers, not investment bankers, and not me. The really important people are the people of MBNA. Without the people of MBNA, there would be no company to take public. As I finish this up, Nick and I are riding down the New Jersey Turnpike, and Nick has managed to attract a state trooper. However, our good day persists. The trooper just scolds Nick, no ticket. Lawyers, investment bankers, regulators, and even troopers, everyone helping to make this a great day. Congratulations to us all. Since 1982, the year MBNA America opened its doors in Delaware, the company had grown from 150 people to over 5,000. In 1991, the year the company went public, it entered a time of growth unparalleled even for MBNA. The man responsible for keeping up with the physical expansion of the company was Roger Crozier.
Roger Crozier was a great National Hockey League goalie. He was also Rookie of the Year. When he came to MBNA, he took over the company's expansion and building projects. As a hockey player, Roger was tough and fearless and extremely acrobatic. As head of facilities, Roger was energetic and very persuasive. He once talked me into letting him enlarge one of my departments. He said he could do it overnight. When I arrived the next morning, one area had been enclosed in sheetrock, but the workers hadn't had time to cut out any doorways. The phones were ringing, but we couldn't answer any of them. That was Roger.
We had really come to a point where our growth in Maine had dictated that we look for a site beyond Camden, and we found a site up in the Belfast area. And when we first looked at how we might position buildings on that site, I can remember a day where Roger sort of led Charlie and I through the site and sort of walked us actually through the woods and stood there in the middle of the woods on a sort of cold, damp Maine day and said, can't you imagine these buildings here, and we're going to build these 4 one-story buildings and we're going to tie them together with an atrium. Roger was able to stand on a piece of land or in an empty building and envision it ultimately with people in it, envision the whole building facility coming alive and bustling with people. And that was really the magic that Roger had when it came to creating the facilities for this company.
For years, the credit card business was a regional industry. When MBNA first moved to Delaware, its customers came mainly from Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Northern Virginia. By 1991, millions of MBNA's customers could be found throughout the United States.
By 1991, we were a national company. We had as many customers in California as we had in the state of Maryland. Texas continued to grow for us. Ohio, Florida. As that growth of credit card customers came about, so did the growth of endorsing organizations. With that growth, we needed to support that with the same kind of service as we had when we were just a small company in Delaware. To do that, we began the concept of regional marketing and regional centers. Atlanta was our first center, and we established that in 1991.
Today, MBNA America has 6 regional centers. Camden, Maine, where the northern region is found. the Mid-Atlantic region in Baltimore, the Southern region in Boca Raton, Florida, the Central region in Cleveland, and the Southwestern region in Dallas. A Western Regional Center will be established in 1997. In addition, there are sales offices in Chicago, New York, Washington, and San Francisco. In 1993, MBNA opened its European headquarters in Chester, England, with a business development office in London. Future plans include operations in Canada and Ireland. In its 15-year history, MBNA has been recognized as having developed one of the most significant innovations in the credit card business, that of affinity marketing. It is a concept that has made the company one of the fastest-growing financial institutions in the past decade. And while credit cards remain the core business, MBNA is moving ahead in two additional areas of major opportunity. In consumer finance, loans have more than doubled in the last year. The company now serves more than 600,000 customers. Late last year, MBNA began offering insurance services and will be marketing new property, casualty, life, and health products. MBNA America's success story has been chronicled in most of the major business, banking, and financial publications in America. Over the years, they've reported the phenomenal growth of endorsing groups, now 4,300, and a customer base that has grown to more than 20 million people. Today, MBNA America is the world's second-largest lender through bank credit cards. The story of MBNA will always be a story of people. Few who were here when it began imagined that in just 15 years, MBNA would become what it is today. Nothing has been more important in this accomplishment than the remarkable drive and commitment of the people of MBNA. From the beginning, the company has been blessed with people who possess an unwavering willingness to take on challenges and meet them with spirit and style. The record of this accomplishment tells of more than memories. It speaks of challenges met and friendships made among people with common objectives. This record chronicles an attitude, how it began and how it continues to flourish with each new day and with each new person who becomes a part of MBNA.